A vibrant young woman with a bright future.
She just was like a magnet. She was very, very pretty, but also very smart.
Is the victim of a truly disturbing murder.
He'd been struck on the head many times.
It's kind of the horror story.
The body itself appeared to have been washed. Jewelry had been put on her after the fact.
She had been staged for this suspect's desires. Who could have done this? Could it be somebody who likes her, somebody who has a fantasy over her?
Detectives hunt for a deranged killer.
We noticed bloodied palm print.
Police had collected about 100 different print impressions.
We could be looking for a serial killer.
Just when it looks like justice may never be served.
It was extremely frustrating.
A stunning discovery points to a murderer in their midst.
When we found out who it was like, are you kidding? Nobody could believe it.
Irvine, California, is a peaceful community with a coastal vibe.
Irvine is very, very pretty. It is pretty much the hub of Orange County. The ocean's only 10 minutes away, and this is where everybody wanted to be.
Irvine has always been considered to be a very safe city and has not been known for violence.
On May 14th, 1979, Irvine's sense of safety is shattered when a man calls 911 to say he can't get a hold of his 22-year-old girlfriend, Savannah Anderson.
Earlier that day, her boyfriend went over to her residence to meet her at about 6 o'clock. He couldn't get any response at the door.
He went back home for a while, couldn't get a hold of her still.
He called the police department about 7:25 p.m. It was a welfare check. Her boyfriend indicated that she had not been feeling well, and so there was a concern that it could be a health issue. When the officer arrived, he met her boyfriend, Bill Mills, and another man, Ken Bergenson, who identified himself as her boss.
They explained they'd both come to the apartment to try to find out if she was okay because nobody had been able to get a hold of her that day.
I was very fortunate to work with Savannah. Savannah was always prompt, and she didn't come that day. All day long, it was like trying to get a hold of her, no answers. By the end of the day, we were very concerned. Something might have happened because that wasn't like her.
The officer found the apartment was in fact locked up tight. There was no key available from the apartment office. The officer found out that a bedroom window nearby was unlocked from the inside. He was able to open that bedroom window.
When the officer made entry, he was able to see a woman with a lot of blood around her, lying in bed, towels wrapped around her face and head. She was cold to the touch.
Both Savannah's boyfriend and boss are taken to the station for questioning, while homicide investigators are called to the scene.
When I walked in, it appeared to me that there was a struggle, a fight, and it was very clear that she was attacked on the bed, and she laid on the bed for some time due to the amount of blood that had pooled in that area. A lot of blood splattering against the back of the wall and the headboard.
She also had towels over her face. After the towels were taken off, her face was found out to be beaten very severely, excessively.
The towels were significant. It tells you that the killer may have known her and didn't want to look at what they've done.
It appeared that the body of the victim had been beaten with something hard.
She had multiple defensive marks on her arms, her hands, nail marks around the neck area, which would indicate that she also had a ligature that had been placed around her neck.
The legs were slightly raised as if some sexual activity may have occurred there.
Perhaps she was the victim of a sexual assault.
The degree of violence to Savannah's body was unusual. Did somebody do it because they were angry at her? If they're angry at her, is that because they knew her, they loved her, they hated her?
Based on the state of the body, police believe Savannah was likely killed in the early hours of the morning. Looking closer, several details strike investigators as highly unusual.
Savannah had some jewelry on her. There was a necklace around her neck, and the clasp was at the front. There was also a watch on her arm that looked like it had just been put on there loosely.
We were surprised to see that those items were still intact on her based upon the brutality of her attacker. So it appeared that he may have just put those items back on her.
The body itself appeared to have been washed, as there's very little blood on the skin surface of the victim.
We noticed drag marks from the bed onto the carpet leading into the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, there was diluted blood with water around the sink area and also the bathtub.
She looked like she had been cleaned up and set in a particular position on the bed. It was staged for this suspect's desires. And I think that was important to get an idea of what this type of person was willing to do to Savannah's body, put things on her, put clothes on her, whatever.
It was very unusual for any type of murder, in my opinion. It looks like somebody wanted to make it look like she was fine and nothing was wrong.
Police find some important clues the killer left behind.
We noticed bloodied palm print leading from the bedroom into the bathroom. Palm prints are identifiable just like fingerprints. There were smudged, bloodied fingerprints on the toilet seat.
They were basically the only way that we'd be able to find out who the killer might have been. There was no DNA at the time.
Detectives find no murder weapon or any sign of forced entry.
We made the determination that the killer may have been known by Savannah and let him in through the front door. Another theory was through an unlocked open window.
After finishing up at the scene, detectives break the news of Savannah's death to her loved ones.
The parents lived in Utah. When I spoke to Savannah's mother on the phone, she was devastated by this. It was her only child. It's probably hard for most people to realize, first of all, what it's like to lose a child, let alone the only child you have. Savannah's mother said Savannah had made a collect call to her about 10 o'clock the previous day on Mother's Day evening. They had talked on the phone for about 2 hours. Savannah was very happy, good mood. That must have made it even more so difficult.
When I found out what had happened to Savannah, we were all totally shocked. My heart just hurt so much. How very sad this beautiful young lady, her life was gone. It's very senseless, very, very hard to understand.
Born in 1956, Savannah Anderson grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and had big dreams.
She was 22 when she moved to Irvine. She came here looking for a better opportunity. She was very independent, and she wanted to do it on her own. I met Savannah when she was working here for Commercial Credit. Savannah was a secretary for the operations manager. She just was like a magnet. She was very, very pretty. I remember when people did come in the office, especially the men, she did attract attention.
Savannah was flattered, but she did have a boyfriend, Bill Mills, whom she met 3 months after moving to California.
She was more of a private person into herself as far as not one to just open up and tell everybody what she was doing. She was definitely on the shy side. When I found out what had happened to Savannah, I felt angry and just crushed and so hurt. My first thought was just how tragic this was. I just can't imagine.
It's kind of the horror story. Who could have done this? Could it be somebody close to her, somebody who knows her, somebody who likes her, somebody who has a fantasy over her? When you have a brutal killing like Savannah's case, detectives immediately looked for the people that are close to her, her boyfriend.
The fact that Bill, the boyfriend, was the one who called the police, is he innocently calling the police because he doesn't know that something had happened to her? Or is he the one who may have done it, so he contacted the police to say, gee, something might be wrong, with the hopes that the police will go ahead and discover the crime, and then say, well, it can't be the boyfriend because he called us here. Could it be almost a way out to try to point the finger away from you? It's just something you have to look into.
Coming up, police question the grieving boyfriend to see if he has something to hide.
His attorney advised him not to take a polygraph.
And detectives uncover more suspects.
Why is he here now at this time? That was suspicious.
Somebody was lying.
Another crime turns the investigation on its head.
This individual was responsible for 5 murders. Perhaps she was the victim of this killer.
And the perpetrator's identity leaves everyone in shock.
It was absolutely devastating when we found out who it was.
Bill Mills.
When you have a crime of passion where somebody is murdered, there are definitely times when a boyfriend who just got angry and upset did the crime.
The first thing we did was began meeting with Bill Mills so we could understand better about Savannah, his relationship.
Bill tells police he and Savannah started dating 6 months ago, and he was in love.
They had met each other in another apartment community. They had gotten along well.
He was about 9 years older than Savannah. In talking with him, had learned that he had just asked her to marry him.
Police are curious if something came up to disrupt the couple's plans for the future.
It was a large, violent crime scene. Did he do it because he was angry at her?
Bill tells investigators he last saw Savannah a day earlier on May 13th.
They had brunch together, and then he spent the day over at her apartment. During the interview with Bill Mills, we found out that Savannah and he did have sex that day. So that would be important later on in case there is semen found inside of her.
Bill told me on the 13th he left her apartment at about 10 p.m.
Once he did leave, what happened to him? Could anybody account for his activity after he apparently left her apartment?
He said he went home, he went to bed, and then to work the following day.
Bill says he and Savannah had plans on the 14th after they both got off work.
He went to her apartment about 6, knocked, couldn't raise her. He went back home for a while, then Bill Mills went ahead and contacted the police department.
Bill denies having anything to do with Savannah's death.
It appeared that Bill Mills was really in love with her, thought it was a very serious relationship. He was very happy with her.
Bill was cooperative. He tried to assist us as much as he could.
But there is one request Bill won't comply with.
There is a red flag. He was asked if he would be willing to take a polygraph. He contacted an attorney, and his attorney advised him not to take one.
We did ask if we could see his body, his hands, his arms, see if there's any indications of a struggle with anybody. But his body was clean. We asked him if we could go ahead and take his finger and palm prints. He agreed to let us do that.
It will be weeks before the results come in. In the meantime, detectives are forced to let Bill go. Next, they move on to another man in Savannah's life.
Part of the investigation and process was to meet with her boss, Ken Bergeson, who had been at the crime scene. In speaking with him, he said he had known her in Salt Lake and had offered her a job locally here.
Ken Bergeson also said that he kind of considered himself a father figure to her. He helped her move. They had talked many times, been out for drinks, been out for lunch and different things.
Could Ken have wanted more than a professional relationship with Savannah?
Was anything going on romantically in the present day?
I asked Ken where he was the night of May 13th, and he indicated that he was with his wife that whole evening.
We did contact the wife to verify that, and there's no reason to believe that he was anywhere but at his home that night.
After the interview, we asked Ken to submit his prints so they could be compared against the crime scene.
We just let him go home that night after the interview.
The police questioned each one of us in the office. I worked for Ken Bergeson at the time. He was just such a nice guy and so concerned about her. She was living by herself, and she was just so beautiful. I just thought, somebody saw her. Somebody was either stalking her or something happened. But I was just so angry that somebody could possibly do something like this. It had to have been somebody I thought who was very sick.
There was nothing really that drew anyone's attention to any issues that Savannah had at work, and nothing came of it.
Police canvassed the apartment complex the next day, searching for witnesses.
We didn't find anyone that said that they'd heard any struggle or screams to corroborate when that attack may have occurred. There were 2 security guards that were assigned to the complex. It was a multi-unit under construction.
So after I got the names of the security personnel who worked that night, which was about a week after we originally responded out there, I talked to the security guard first who worked the midnight to 6:30 shift. His name was Chuck Doyle.
According to Doyle, security was hired to ensure that residents were safe and to overlook any construction sites and that sort of thing for theft.
Tell tells investigators on a usual shift he would drive through the complex and also patrol by foot.
I asked him how he found out about the murder of the woman, and he said he found out through the company. I asked him if he knew the lady who lived there, showed him 2 pictures, and he picked out the picture of Savannah Anderson.
When asked about his dealings with Savannah, Chuck's answer gives investigators cause for concern.
He indicated about a month prior that he'd helped Savannah gain entry into her apartment and slid a window open for her.
It was notable that Mr. Doyle had said he was aware that at least at that time one of the windows was unlocked.
Doyle said, "You'll find my fingerprints on Savannah's window, and this is the reason why." Immediately, we printed him. It really made me zero in on him as a potential suspect.
Security guard Chuck Doyle has drawn suspicion after admitting that his fingerprints are likely on her unlocked window.
She had locked herself out of her apartment before, contacted him while he was on the site to see if he could help her get into the apartment. The security did not have any pass keys. He found that a window was unlocked. He was able to slide the window open. He also said that he didn't go inside. That could be for a couple of reasons. Could be perfectly innocent that he didn't go inside. Could also be to say, well, I didn't go inside if he may have somehow be involved in the death.
Had Chuck slipped in through the same unlocked window to kill Savannah? Police press him for his movements that night.
Chuck Doyle said that he reported for duty on the 14th at midnight, or was supposed to, indicated that he was about 15 minutes late.
He was supposed to replace a security guard named Bob Sellers.
He drove by Savannah's and saw her talking on the phone. He thought maybe that was around 12:15 or so, 12:20, but was not certain.
He went and parked next to Bob Sellers' car. About 12:30, he estimated, Sellers approached him. He got daily reports from Sellers, and then Sellers went ahead and got in his car and drove off.
When detectives ask what happened next, Chuck's answer raises even more suspicion.
He said he drove around a while, went back to the carport, and went to sleep, which would seem very odd.
He thought he probably nodded off for a while.
Doyle says that he was awoken by a car door slam. It was Sellers who had returned and invited him to breakfast. Doyle says it was maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. They went to breakfast at Spire's restaurant, a 24-hour cafe.
The cafe is just 10 minutes from the complex.
Doyle said that he was dropped off by Sellers at about 2:30 in the morning.
Chuck says the rest of his shift was uneventful, and he clocked out at 6:30 a.m.
There's just something really unusual about the sequence of events as being described by Doyle.
Investigators are left with more questions than answers. Did Savannah die on Chuck's watch? Or was he the one who killed her? Hoping for clarity and to corroborate Chuck's story, they turn to the other security guard, Robert Sellers. Robert Sellers enlisted into the Marine Corps at age 17. He's 22 now.
He was assigned that day to work from about 4 in the afternoon, and he was supposed to get off at about midnight that night. I asked him if he knew who Savannah Anderson was. He said he had talked to both her and her boyfriend that evening.
Sellers told me that he thought he saw Savannah around 10 p.m. on the phone.
Robert confirms that Chuck was late for work, so he didn't leave the apartment complex until around 12:30 a.m.
After leaving Doyle, he then went home, showered.
As a U.S. Marine, he was supposed to go to a Marine base at 6 o'clock in the morning.
He decided it wasn't worth trying to go to sleep. So he thought, well, I'll just go out to breakfast with Doyle. So that's when he returned.
Sellers told me that he came back to the complex about 3:30, which is an hour and a half or 2 hours after what Doyle recalled this happening. So there was this inconsistency between the both of them about what time they must have gone to the restaurant. Sellers said there was a waitress named Gail who waited on him. I took note of that. But at the end of the Sellers interview, we asked if he would go ahead and give us finger and palm prints, which he agreed to.
Investigators hope the autopsy report can help them pinpoint Savannah's time of death.
According to the coroner's report, Savannah Anderson died at approximately 2 a.m. on May 14th. The cause of death was strangulation.
She'd been struck on the head many times, found multiple contusions on her face. There was broken fingernails, a broken jaw, cracked teeth.
We did have biological fluids, semen, that was found, but DNA was not in existence at the time, so we didn't have that tool.
My first thought was just how horrible to die like that. I cried and I was just very upset just thinking that something like that had happened to a person that was just so lovely. It's just terrible.
If Savannah was killed at 2 a.m., which security guard is telling the truth? Was Chuck really off-site like he claimed? Or was Robert right, meaning Chuck was at the apartment complex when the murder took place?
There was a wide gap and discrepancy between their two stories and timing. So the two were brought in together to try and determine if someone was mistaken about time.
They both basically stuck to their stories. I wasn't sure which either timeline might have been correct, whether it might have been Doyle's or Sellers, because they were just too far apart. So we thought at that time somebody was lying.
The two security guards from her apartment complex are unable to agree where they were at 2 a.m. when Savannah was killed.
The timing is very sketchy between what Doyle says and what we learned from Sellers.
This is raising a lot of to me, because why don't they know where they were, what time they were?
Going over time discrepancies, Doyle said, well, I slept. I could be mistaken. I'm not sure. So Sellers seemed to be more credible time-wise.
According to Robert Sellers, Chuck was on duty at 2 a.m., and the pair only went to Spire's restaurant around 3:30 a.m.
I asked one of the patrol guys to go ahead and try to contact any waitress there that might have been named Gail to see if she recalled the security guys coming in there at all. They weren't able to find a Gail that worked at the Spire's restaurant, so we could not identify that particular part of the story. It looked like the best chance of us determining who the suspect was going to be through the fingerprint and palm print evidence left behind. At this time, we already had fingerprints and palm prints from the boyfriend, Bill Mills, the boss, Ken Bergerson, and from the two security guards, Chuck Doyle and Bob Sellers. And I felt that if we can find out if any of those were the palm prints, that's going to be the resolution of our case. We'd be able to determine who had done it. So we sent them away with high hopes that we're going to be able to resolve the case once we get the results back.
While waiting for the results, investigators dig deeper into Savannah's life, hoping something will point to her killer.
Savannah seemed to be a very likable person who had, from all reports, a good mind, good IQ, personable, funny, one that you would be very happy to have as a daughter.
She was very sweet, very sophisticated, quiet. She had very strong values and morals. You know, she was just not one of those that was going to be out looking for trouble. Just how she went and how young she went is so tragic. Our world is, it's cruel.
We interviewed neighbors. Savannah had been at the apartment complex about 6 weeks. Her contacts, friends, were very limited. What I learned through investigation was Savannah had moved deliberately for the safety of having security on the premises.
She really wanted a place that felt safe, and the fact that they had security, she loved that aspect of it. She felt really good about where she was going.
2 months after Savannah's death, police received the results of the finger and palm print analysis from the scene.
I was really hoping we heard back from the crime lab that it's going to be one of the guys we'd already talked to.
In terms of identification and finding and identifying that individual, it was everything.
None of the prints that came back were any of the fingerprints submitted from the bloody finger and palm prints. Really disappointing. Couldn't figure out why. It seemed like there should have been somebody in there that was responsible for it, yet the crime lab is telling us that these weren't the responsible parties at all. We thought we had some viable suspect, but we're told, nope, it's not them. Well, now what? Wow.
The results mean Savannah's boyfriend, her boss, and the two security guards are all cleared.
I was very discouraged, but thought, okay, we just haven't come across the perpetrator. He's out there. We'll find him. We'll identify him. I feel comfortable with that based on the palm print.
Detectives immediately looked for people in the area that maybe had criminal histories. They looked at people that had been arrested after that for similar type of break-in crimes. And if they had any suspicions whatsoever, they would get their palm print and their fingerprints, and they'd compare them to the crime scene prints and then rule them out if they didn't match.
3 months after the crime, police had collected about 100 different print impressions.
The palm prints didn't match. It was extremely frustrating to work through this.
With the case threatening to turn cold, detectives refused to quit and take the case in a chilling new direction.
After going through potential suspects that were eliminated through the palm print, we began to examine that Savannah Anderson may be the victim of a serial killer known as the Bedroom Basher. This individual was responsible for 5 murders in the Orange County area at the time.
With a population under 2 million people, the number of attacks in a matter of months is troubling, and the similarities striking.
He would target young lone females between 17 and 35, ground floor apartments, open windows, open doors. Once inside, he would bludgeon, strangle, and sexually assault the females. So Savannah certainly fit that MO. And so we had to take a real strong look at perhaps she was the victim of this individual who had not been identified. We could be looking for a serial killer.
Detectives investigating the brutal murder of Savannah Anderson now believe she may have fallen victim to a serial killer.
Bedroom Basher went after females in homes or apartments in the Orange County area, raped them, in at least one case, killed somebody by bludgeoning them, which is what happened to Savannah.
Based upon the number of bludgeonings in Orange County, which were 5, we felt that there would be another that would take place.
5 months after Savannah's murder, investigators' worst fears are confirmed when the serial killer strikes again.
During this time, there was a woman in Orange County that had been attacked, believed by the Bedroom Basher, who survived and was able to give a description to the police. A composite drawing was made. She described the perpetrator as a male, olive skin, pockmarked face, long hair, mustache, dark eyes, in his late 20s, early 30s. A task force was created in Orange County. Flyers were disseminated to the public and to patrol units. It resulted in multiple contacts of people who believed they knew who this individual was. Unfortunately, none of those resulted in the apprehension of the individual.
A year after the murder, with no arrests and a killer on the loose, women in the area live in a constant state of terror.
The community was definitely impacted by this terrible murder. The news was full of these kind of things, and it did create fear among people. The fact that I was living so close by, it's a little scary.
Any female who resided by themselves took extra precautions to ensure that their window doors were in fact locked. Every possibility we looked at, we were unable to make any headway in determining what happened to Savannah Anderson. It was extremely frustrating. There was no one else that we were aware of that could provide any insight and or potentially could be a suspect.
3 years after Savannah's murder, her case remains unsolved.
After you go through tips, leads, you step back, you re-examine, you say, what did I miss? It's got to be there. What did I miss?
I started to believe that they just weren't going to find out. And that's terrible to think that something like that could happen and that this person is out there roaming around still.
2 more years pass until a rookie homicide detective takes a renewed interest in the case.
Savannah's case was the first cold case that I ever worked. I was familiar with it because I was in patrol when it happened. And I thought, well, nobody's looked at it for a while. Maybe I should look at it.
A friend of mine who knows Larry Montgomery very well calls him the evidence whisperer.
I was aware he was looking at the Savannah Anderson case, and at one point he came to me and we compared notes on it.
After combing through all the evidence, detectives revisit whether Savannah was a victim of the still unidentified Bedroom Basher.
The possibility that she was killed by a serial killer was definitely looked at. I was looking at anything that I could use to direct me to a possible suspect. I'm looking at what was done at the crime scene, what did the suspect do with the body, what was maybe in his mind because of what he did.
In comparing Savannah's murder to those committed by the bedroom basher, something just doesn't add up.
The one thing that stood out that was not similar was the cleaning up of the victim.
When I look at a crime scene like this, it's somebody who has a desire for Savannah. She appeared uninjured other than towels on top of her face. It wasn't the gore that he liked. He had to kill her in order to get her into a position where he could fantasize about having an actual relationship with her. This is a real girl now, as opposed to a dead body. The question in this case is, who did it? All the people we looked at and that looked good were not matching the prints. There was one point where I started looking at the security guards to see what they were doing, because they were certainly involved in being there at the time. There were very big differences between what Doyle said happened and what Sellers said happened that night, and I thought that was very odd.
I thought at the time that I interviewed Doyle that one of the problems was he may have gone to sleep for a while. That would certainly account for the timeline being different, or his uneasiness in talking to us about that particular time period.
Police quickly locate Chuck and bring him in for another interview. His story about what happened the night of the murder is the same, but a few details stand out.
Doyle said that he got to the site probably 10 minutes late. He had not been able to find the person he was supposed to replace yet, Bob Sellers. About 12:30, Doyle saw Sellers come with his shirt in his hand, and I asked Doyle, did you ever ask him why he was late or why he didn't have his uniform shirt on? He said, no, he never asked him that. He just figures he's on his own time, so he can probably wear whatever he wants.
That's unusual. That right there's a big red flag.
That's not the only thing that raises alarm bells.
Doyle said that Sellers had commented about wanting to have a drink with Savannah. He thought she was very attractive.
Detectives asked Chuck Doyle if Robert Sellers ever confided anything else to him.
Regarding the relationship between Doyle and Sellers, they weren't buddies. They didn't do things together. They weren't really close friends.
Following this lead, investigators asked Chuck if it was common for them to go for breakfast during a shift, like they did the night of the murder.
They never did that before, so why is Sellers there on a night when he's supposed to leave soon to go to work at the base, saying, hey, you want to go get something to eat? It didn't seem to fit, but I had the paperwork that shows that he had been exonerated. It wasn't his print, but I saw all kinds of things that Sellers did that was suspicious. Why is he here now at this time? It all fits if he came back and did something with the body at that time. It all made sense, time-wise. And that's when I decided we need to find those prints again and see if we matched them properly.
Cold case investigators suspect her killer has been hiding in plain sight the entire time.
I got a suspicion that this guy, Robert Sellers, might be the guy because there's too many lies or mistakes. He's already been exonerated, and I didn't believe the exoneration. We need to find somebody who's better than our sheriff's department, who's best in the world that we can get.
Robert's prints and the ones found at the crime scene are rushed to FBI headquarters.
The FBI discovered that some parts of the palm print were so thick with blood that it became a negative. It was the opposite of what it should be because of the thick blood. The thick blood looked like the ridges when really they were the valleys of the print.
The FBI reanalyzed the palm print and compared it to prints obtained from Robert.
The next day, the fingerprint lab at the FBI was able to identify about 24 points of identification, a positive identification of security guard Bob Sellers.
We have to arrest him now. Sellers, at the time that he was arrested, was living in a mobile home up in Brea at the police department. He was presented with evidence that his prints are in fact in the blood there. He didn't come forward right away, but very quickly after he had some lies, he did admit that he did everything that we thought he did.
He was obsessed with her. He found her very attractive. He thought perhaps by going into her apartment that he might convince her of some romantic get-together. He gained entry into her apartment through an unlocked window where he could hear her on the telephone talking with her mother. He stayed in the bedroom, hid as best possible while she talked in the kitchen living room area. Once she got off the phone at about a little after 12, she came into the bedroom. When she saw him, she was thinking, I have an intruder, a man in here, and I'm frightened. And he became frightened and realized that he had to silence officer. He pulled out his baton and began striking her. He then went to strangulation.
During the struggle with Savannah, he said that his shirt got bloody, so he had to take it off. So when he went to see Doyle, he had his shirt in his hand so that his replacement would not see the blood on it.
And then he goes home, gets cleaned up, sneaks back in, and then goes into Savannah's apartment. Sellers wanted her sexually. He had to kill her to get that. He did talk about he wanted her to be clean, and so that's why he drug her into the shower and washed the blood off of her and took her back into the bedroom and wrapped her head in towels because she was so badly beaten. So then he just had a body that was clean and he could have his fantasy. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he's trying to sneak out, and that's when Doyle sees him, and that's when, at the spur of the moment, he has to all of a sudden pretend like, oh, I'm here to go to breakfast with you, okay? He almost seemed relieved when he finally was able to confess that he actually did kill Savannah.
On March 29th, 1984, Robert Sellers is charged with murder, rape, attempted rape, and burglary.
I think after 5 years, he thought he probably did get away with it. In that time, he got married, started a family. The anguish that he caused with Savannah Anderson's death, he didn't deserve having that extra 5 years.
On November 4th, 1986, Robert Sellers is found guilty of first-degree murder and a special circumstance of rape. But his lawyers win his appeal.
His conviction was overturned on a technicality. The fact that the prosecution could not prove that she was alive during the rape changed the verdict for a life without possibility of parole.
Instead of a retrial, prosecutors offer Robert a deal. He accepts to avoid the death penalty and pleads guilty to first-degree murder. He is sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
Here you have a guard, a man, a Marine, placed there to protect the residents, and it turned out he is the one committing the crime. One would not expect the one who is protecting you to be your killer.
It was absolutely devastating when we found out who it was. The irony of it all was the fact that she moved to this beautiful apartment complex thinking she was going to be safe and secure. And it was the security guard that actually did it. It was like, are you kidding? Nobody could believe it.
Authorities don't find anything to link Robert Sellers to the bedroom basher killings. In 1996, Gerald Parker was identified and convicted of those crimes. In 1999, Robert Sellers died in prison.
I do feel there was justice, especially when I found out that he died after he had been in prison.
My mother did not like this woman from the minute she walked in her room.
This is not a woman who should have been doing nursing. She did not like the people she dealt with.
And I said to my mum, you've got to complain, Mum. You can't have this nurse doing this.
The effect of those complaints is to have terrible consequences for the residents of St. Andrews.
I told you, I know how to commit perfect murder.
Mum's character, she was a very happy-go-lucky person. However, she did drink like a fish, smoke like a chimney, and if she liked you, she liked you, and if she didn't, she didn't. But she had the warmest heart, and she would give you her shirt off her back, because that's the type of woman that she was. She was a loving, caring mum. I couldn't have asked for another mother on this earth other than the one I had.
Marie Arrow, at age 82, falls in her home and suffers some pretty extensive injuries at that age.
She went out the back, actually, to get some clothes off the line, and she slipped and fell. And she laid there 4 days without anyone knowing.
Her family takes her to the hospital. She goes through a recovery process, but they really decide at that point it's just too much to bring her back home, and she needs to seek professional care outside of home. They're looking around locally, and they find St. Andrew's Village, which is a nursing home nearby, and it seems to be a perfect fit for Marie and the family.
The first 6 months she whinged, complained and all that sort of thing. She hated her.
It's a big change from her independent lifestyle she once had. However, after several months of this, where she becomes more accustomed to it, her health actually starts improving quite substantially.
She had a great room. She had a beautiful room, room 10, and it overlooked the bowling club. And that's so she watched the bowlers play bowls all day. She was getting better and better and better. And within a year, she was back up to 70 kilos. She was laughing, she was happy, she was smiling. And then she decided she liked St. Andrew's. You know, liked the activities, loved the nurses, loved them. And I would ring Mum every morning at 9 o'clock. I would ring her and that to say hello, and we'd sit there.
That's until Megan Haynes is employed as a new member of staff at St. Andrew's Village.
Mum had never complained about any of the nurses. She had a reasonably good life. She was comfortable, she was happy, until Megan Haynes walked through that door.
Megan Haynes was born in South Africa. She grew up during the 1960s apartheid era. This was a very tumultuous time, and she eventually decided that she wanted to leave the country and emigrate to Australia. She did so in 2000, where she decided to register as a nurse.
Don't know what had happened in South Africa. As a person of colour, she would have suffered under the apartheid system. Where her record comes into focus is when she moved to Victoria, and then her problems were more documented.
She worked at a series of nursing homes and different hospitals, essentially just trying to make it in the field as a nurse. She really was starting over, and this was a new life, a new beginning for her. Despite seemingly having this new start in life where she could really be anything and do anything, it seemed that Megan Haynes really started a downward slope almost immediately upon her arrival in Australia.
There were already question marks over her work as a nurse. There were various misconduct charges that showed that she really was not looking after the patients in the way that a nurse should be.
Megan had been fired from several jobs down south in other states.
For anybody to seem so resentful while on the job, it really suggests that they're in the wrong profession, but particularly in a field where caregiving and helping others is the hallmark of the profession.
She was reported for a minor assault of an elderly patient. It's understood that she slapped or pushed a patient at the Caulfield nursing home.
A more serious allegation of misconduct came against Megan Haynes from two different patients.
In the same nursing home, routine blood tests picked up that there was insulin in the systems of two of the patients who shouldn't have had any insulin in their system.
Insulin is a drug that's specifically used for people that have the inability to make insulin themselves naturally. This is something that everybody needs to regulate our blood sugar. But particularly for diabetics, this is something your body cannot do naturally. But for people that are not diabetic, who receive insulin injections. This could be a severe hazard to your health, even causing death.
Suspicion fell on everyone, but the only nurse who was on duty in the ward at the time was Megan Haynes. The drug patients all had jewellery missing from their rooms.
The suspicion held by patients, their families, and law enforcement is that Megan Haynes is stealing jewelry from the elderly patients and then trying to drug them, essentially to cover it up.
And 3 days after the second patient was drugged, police actually searched Haynes' home, but they didn't find any jewellery there. They did, however, find a small amount of cannabis, and Haynes was charged with drug possession over that.
Although the elderly patients had very similar stories and reported that they had both been receiving an overdose of insulin and they had jewelry stolen, because the police had essentially no evidence tying Megan Haynes to either the insulin overdose or the theft of the jewelry, they discontinued the investigation and said there was nothing more that they could do about either.
It's understood that that's because the elderly patients didn't suffer any extreme health impact from it. So it was all sort of washed over and left as it was.
Although the authorities do not have enough evidence to prosecute and charge Megan Haynes with any of the crimes that she's suspected of, they do have enough to take away her medical license or her ability to practice as a nurse, and so she's essentially banned from serving as a nurse in the state of Victoria from that point forward.
When the Health Practitioners Watchdog system moved from a state to a federal system, Haynes applied to have her registration reinstated, and she was successful in this.
Megan Haynes was able to regain her license, and she was able to practice again throughout Australia.
Despite this very checkered history of misconduct.
She played off the problems in Australia of the state system, that one state would not speak to the other, or at least it certainly didn't go through, so she could move from Victoria, where she had all these things against her, to Ballina, New South Wales.
In 2014, Megan Haynes was able to find new employment, this time at a nursing home called St. Andrew's Village in New South Wales. And that's where she started working as a nurse, this time with a new set of patients.
Nurse, I need help.
Sort it out yourself, you disgusting old biddy.
Nurse!
Like nurse nothing.
We would expect that Megan Haynes would be so much more willing to provide these basic things to her patients, but she made it very clear that she didn't want to.
So one woman had simply asked to go to the toilet, and Megan Haynes refused to take her. Another woman wanted some cream rubbed onto her. Megan said to her, "Cover yourself up, you look disgusting." And the third woman said that her foot was hurt as Megan Haynes transported her back to her bed. So these allegations really show that she had very little regard for the people that she was charged for caring for.
When you place your loved ones in there, You expect them to be looked after and loved and not neglected and not hurt and not spoken to like a doormat. She did say to me on the Tuesday morning, we've got a new nurse and I don't like her, but she was blubbering, she was crying until I, like, Mum, I can't understand you. And I said, what's wrong? And she said to me, we've got this new night nurse and her name's Megan. She, she left me, blah, 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 and she went on telling me about how she'd rung the bell for 40 minutes. She came in and found out that Mum had dirtied herself and told her that she can just lay in it, dragged her in a cold shower the next morning, don't tell anyone or I'll kill you.
She did not like the people she dealt with. She obviously didn't. She saw them as demanding, draining, unreasonable, unpleasant. And this clearly leaves no doubt that she should not have been in nursing in the first place.
Although many people try to avoid the night shift for obvious reasons, it's far more difficult on the body. A lot of people don't like sleeping all day and then having to work at night. Curiously, this is what Megan Haynes requested to work, and there are a few different reasons why this may be the case. One is she really didn't want to have to deal with any patients, so she preferred to work while they were sleeping, and essentially she could just do whatever she wanted. Second theory is that she really was hoping to be unsupervised. She didn't want a lot of eyes looking at what she was doing.
Why do you think she wants night shift? Why do you think that she asked for night shift? So that she could thieve without the elderly seeing her, so that she could take their money, their jewellery. My mother is a very, very, very good judge of character. And my mother did not like this woman from the minute she walked in her room.
Incredibly, Megan Haynes has been at St. Andrew's Village as a nurse for just over a week when 3 patients come forward and make their first complaints about her behavior.
Nurse! Nurse!
It's just a smell. Who calls herself a patient? She can wait.
I need help! I need help! I need
Shut
help!
up! I'll be there in a minute. Now, what was I saying? Oh, yes, tonight. So where are you taking me?
I rang Mum the next day and I said, how was she last night? Well, it was appalling what my mum told me. It was appalling to know that she pushed Marjorie, Mum's friend, over. She had walked into Isabel's room and Isabel had rung the bell and she walked in and said, I want to go to the toilet, do we? And she turned around and she said, piss in your pad, and walked out. That was on the Tuesday night.
Go back to your room and stay out of my sight.
That woman said something or did something to terrify my mum. And that was what Mum said. She told Mum that she wasn't going to tell anybody or she'd tell her.
Nurse! I need help! I need help!
I said to my mum, you've got to complain, Mum. You can't have this nurse doing this. You've got to complain. And she said, oh, we're all scared. And I said, get everybody together and complain. And she said, I'm so frightened of her. What's she going to do to me if I complain? I said, oh, Mum, what's she going to do, murder you?
The effect of those complaints is to have terrible consequences for the residents of St. Andrews.
Haynes was was told about these complaints, and she was also told who had made the complaint. She was given the names of the people who had complained about her.
When I phoned her Friday morning, she was so excited because she said, "Oh, guess what? I did what you told me to do, and we've all made the complaints. So here's 4 complaints against this nurse, and she's only been there 6 nights. That's it."
After receiving complaints from residents about Megan Haynes, nursing home authorities tell her that they want to meet the next week to have a more thorough discussion about the complaints that have been raised against her.
She was told that she mustn't go into their rooms without another care worker with her. She wasn't allowed to go into the rooms on her own, but she completely disregarded this.
Because of the allegations that have been raised, she realizes that the carer that's supposed to go with her around to any patient's rooms will be watching her every move, and so she concocts a plan where she gets the carer to go to the other side of the nursing home to check on patients.
She sent the carer to another section of the home, and the carer said, "Oh, but I'm not supposed to go over there until da-da-da-da, whatever time." And she said, "I want you to go now." And she said, "Oh, okay." So this carer went over to the other section to help the other girls, and that was between 11 and 1.
What we know is that sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. the next morning, Megan Haynes did manage to enter 2 of the women's rooms on her own.
It's pretty clear at this point that Megan Haynes is extremely anxious. She is fearful that an investigation into her could lead authorities to uncover what had happened previously in Victoria, where she was serving as a nurse before this. This is now her 2nd attempt at serving as a nurse, and this is about to come crashing down. Megan Haynes comes up with a plan where she could essentially neutralize the patients that raise the complaints, and has an idea that by injecting patients with insulin, she can essentially make it look like they naturally died, but she would no longer have complainants raising concerns against her. The investigation would be dropped, and everything would go back to the way it was.
Her superficial motive was to solve a problem. You're complaining about me, I'm going to lose my job, I've got nowhere to go. If I kill you, I've solved the problem. But we can see that this did not just happen then. There's the build-up of issues that went back to her time in Victoria. In other words, for someone like this was becoming more and more a viable way to deal with these issues, to deal with your rage, to deal with your sense of how dare anyone threaten me, challenge me, put me in a bad situation. And you can use the term overweening arrogance, which was feeding into this belief that people who trouble me, people who cause problems, these patients are going to threaten my career again. I could get sacked, and this time I've probably got nowhere to run to. There's only one way to deal with it.
Megan Haynes thinks she's found a foolproof way to cover up her crimes.
Sometime between midnight and 1 a.m, Megan Haynes was able to enter the rooms of Mari Darragh and Isabel Spencer on her own, and she injected both of them with insulin, even though they were not insulin dependent.
And I couldn't believe that somebody could be so evil. Evil.
A short time later, she went into the room of the 3rd complainant, and at this time the woman awoke, so there was no real opportunity for her to inject her with insulin.
She concocted a decoy reason, which was that she was there to administer a painkiller. She administers this drug and then writes it down on the patient's chart. However, she writes down the time as being around 11 p.m. This was clearly not the time that she was there, and it couldn't have been the time that she was there.
She wrote that time down wrong because that was the time that she was doing handover. So she couldn't have possibly been in that room at 11 p.m. So we can see from that she was trying to fudge the facts and shift the focus. She didn't want people to know exactly where she was at the time when the two victims would have been suffering from the effects of the insulin that they'd been given unnecessarily.
This actually turns out to be a very critical piece of evidence later on in the investigation against Megan Haynes. Why would she do this if there was nothing to hide? Insulin can take a bit of time for it to have the lethal effects that Megan had intended, and it turns out that was exactly the case here, where two of the patients that she had injected with insulin were still alive by the morning.
Mum's room was opposite the nurse's station and next door to the medical room. And this carer heard Mum groaning and moaning and everything. And she went to walk in there, and Megan Haynes grabbed her and said, Don't go in there and disturb Marie. Don't, she's just having a nightmare. And they were both standing in the doorway, and Megan goes, "You're all right, Marie, go back to sleep." And that was my mum asking for help, trying to tell somebody what had happened. But that witch stopped the carer from going in.
At 6 a.m. that morning, Megan Haynes didn't give Isabella Spencer her necessary dose of antibiotics, and it's understood that that was because she didn't want to raise the alarm about Isabella Spencer's rapidly deteriorating state of health.
Rather than doing anything to counteract the effects, Megan decides that she was just going to leave, go home, and let the medicine take its intended course.
Later that morning, both Ms. Dara and Ms. Spencer were found in hypoglycemic comas. Staff initially thought that they had suffered from a stroke.
Elderly patients die at rates that are much higher than other patients, meaning that there's fewer eyebrows raised if this does occur, and the investigations that would typically happen if a younger patient died wouldn't happen, meaning it's a lot easier to get away with these types of murders.
It was only when later blood tests revealed the presence of insulin that suspicions were really aroused.
It became clear to the nursing home that what they're looking at is definitely a crime.
When I was contacted to say my mother had had a stroke, I jumped in the car and took off down there, and I got there at 12:10, and I was cuddling her and kissing her and telling her I was bringing her home, and that it wasn't until a detective came in the room and knelt down beside me and said, "I have to leave because it's a crime scene." And I what? And he said, "A crime scene, we need you to go, we've got our fingerprint people here." And I just screamed, "Megan Haynes has murdered my mum." I had a feeling. When he said a crime scene, that was all that came to my brain because of mum complaining, feeling scared, all sorts of things, you know. I just had a feeling.
After police were called in on this case for what was clearly a double murder, there was only one suspect, and that was Megan Haynes. Megan Haynes had been the subject of numerous complaints by nursing home patients, two of which were now dead.
On May the 16th, police searched Megan Haynes' Haynes' home and confiscated some medication, they also intercepted a phone call between Megan Haynes and a man named Herman. Now, in this phone call to Herman, Megan Haynes says that 2 of the nursing home residents died as a result of being given the wrong medication.
Apparently, the patients were actually given wrong medication.
Now, this isn't something that Megan Haynes could have known, because at that stage she should have only known that they had died as a result of unknown circumstances.
Yes, to 2 people.
But she had this prior knowledge. She knew that there was something else to it, and that's when suspicions were really aroused.
Megan Haynes becomes an even stronger suspect for these crimes.
The police kept saying to my brother and sister and I, we don't want anything to get out. Do not use Facebook. Do not do this. Do not do that, because we have to catch her. Or not her, we have to catch the person, right?
When police interview Megan's boyfriend, there are interesting things they learned from this. It became clear that Megan had taken no responsibility for her actions in the past. When she was fired from her last nursing position, she blamed everything on other people. She said it was their fault and nothing had to do with her behavior.
Well, he did say to me that every time she was sacked, she would come home and go, I've been sacked, or what, I'm leaving, or whatever. And he'd go, oh, not again, and she'd go, oh, like it's their fault. It's their fault, it's not her fault. And that's what he said to me, that she was always blaming the other person. So she never ever blamed herself.
You like it?
Oh, yeah, very pretty. An expensive gift.
Something I got myself, actually. I like to treat myself.
Shh, I'm watching this.
But if you're interested in that stuff, you should talk to me. I know all about that.
Yeah? What would you know?
How to commit the perfect murder. That's what I know.
They had been watching a crime show when she turned and said, I know how to kill someone. You just have to administer insulin and you can kill them, and there's no trace of it at all. So that's a very damning fact that Megan Haynes actually knew how she could kill elderly people with insulin, and she thought that she could get away with it.
The problem with poison is that it will show up in an autopsy.
You're nuts.
But if you use something a little different, there won't be a trace.
What?
Insulin. That's what. You shove a bit of insulin in someone, and 24 hours later, there won't be a trace. Shocked you, have I? I told you. I know how to commit the perfect murder.
Perfect for an evil so-and-so.
Maybe that's why you like me so much.
There's certainly a boasting element. It's the same reason they sometimes hang around after somebody's died, so they can see the fuss and enjoy the sensation. They do like talking about it. It's a spin-off from the fact that healthcare people need a certain amount of black humour to survive, and this is healthy and reasonable. But people like this take it much further. The other thing to add is there's a particular aura around the use of insulin for murder.
The interesting thing about insulin is that it can be metabolized by the body, and if it's not picked up early enough, there's no trace of it.
Another very attractive reason that insulin is used as a drug of choice in murder is that it's also readily available. Most nursing homes, hospital facilities, all of them carry insulin. There's so much that it's difficult to track. All of this makes it very difficult to trace if it is used.
Insulin. That's what.
I was actually standing over Mum's grave reading a poem, and my partner and my brother were either side of me because I was shaking, and this man was talking to our sister. I just finished with the poem, and then I just kissed the poem and put it in on top of Mum because it was when Mum was going down, and my partner handed me a rose to do the same. The cask was going down, and my sister turned around and she said, "Excuse me, everybody, I've just been informed that Mum was murdered." And I just remember screaming.
When Megan Haynes was arrested for the murders, it prompted police to reopen the allegations of theft against her. And it was during this time that Megan Haynes was visited by a relative, and apparently she told that relative that she had hidden the jewellery in a very specific location, and she told that relative to go and search for the jewellery, and this was all reported to police. But when police themselves went to her property and tried to search for the jewellery, it had gone. It's never really surfaced exactly where that jewellery was disposed of or how it was disposed of.
Megan Haynes pleads not guilty. This continues a pattern of her not taking responsibility for her actions and essentially denying any responsibility, saying she had nothing to do with it, denying all the facts, and basically saying everybody else was wrong, but she was the one in the right.
Oh my God. Day after day looking at her, this far away from her, she had 3 officers around where she was sitting, and I just glared at her because to me, I'd never been through anything like this, so it was so surreal. And I was still, after 2.5 years, getting my head around that I'm never going to see my mum again, never in life, and I'll never get over it. I'll never get over it.
Sort it out yourself, you disgusting old biddy.
Nurse!
But nurse nothing.
To see her every day sitting there gloating, telling her solicitor and her baron, "Come here, get here," you know, ordering them around and everything, you know, and I just thought to myself, who are you? Who are you?
Megan Haynes showed no real remorse for her crimes.
I need help! I need help!
Without having spoken to Megan, it's difficult to essentially determine her personality. However, there are a few things that shine through that really indicates she had a real difficulty ever taking responsibility for her actions. She always wanted to blame others and seemed to have this entitlement towards what she was doing, including stealing from elderly people, acting out in the way she wanted to, gaining employment as a nurse, but then not wanting to take care of the elderly, things that shows that she was probably bordering on narcissistic level of pathology.
What's really so disturbing about this crime is that it appears the entire reason that she killed these 2 elderly residents was to avoid the consequences and the inconvenience of being investigated over their complaints. So she was already on probation at the time, and she just didn't want the inconvenience. She didn't want anyone looking into what she was doing. And when she heard about the complaints they'd made, she believed that it would be easier for her, it would be more convenient for her if she simply erased the problem, if she simply killed them and the complaints would disappear, rather than having to go through more investigations into her conduct.
I just thought to myself, you're going down, girlfriend. There's no way you're going to walk out of this courtroom. No way.
The jury found found her guilty, and she was given a 36-year maximum sentence with 27 years non-parole. So that's an extremely lengthy sentence, and Megan Haynes certainly will be a very old woman herself by the time she ever gets out of jail.
Megan Haynes meets many of the criteria that you find for healthcare serial killers. She had a spotty track record in disciplinary terms. She came from an uncertain background. She was marginal. And she stout.
Megan Haynes. You know, she's destroyed a lot of people. A lot of people. She's destroyed a lot of lives. I mean, I come from a family of probably 40. We're all destroyed with what she's done to us. And then you've got Izzy's family. They're all destroyed. You've got her children. How destroyed are they with what she's done? Do evil people ever think of others other than themselves? I don't think so. But like I said, I don't hate her. She's not worth my energy.
Good girl. You sing that all the time, didn't you?
A young mother vanishes without a trace in a rural part of Lancashire in the northwest of England.
Where is she? Where has she been left? What has happened to Katie?
Quickly, a prime suspect emerges, but he is determined to lead the investigation astray.
Everything that he says has happened has been proved to not be true, proved to be impossible.
They didn't see this as a straightforward missing person case. They had helicopters up, they had dogs, they had officers, everybody was searching the forest for this shallow grave. The Forest of Bowland is such a picturesque place. It's a real beauty spot. It's the last place that you would expect something so dark and chilling to take place.
Forest of Bowland, also known as Bowland Fells, is a picturesque area of gritstone fells and valleys in the northeast of Lancashire.
Bowland in Lancashire is a beautiful rural part of the UK. There's over 800 kilometres of an area of outstanding natural beauty in the forest surrounding it. It's one of the most, idyllic places that people would associate with the greener parts of England.
It's really popular for people that are taking the dogs out for walks. There's lots of people that go hiking. A bit of mountain biking goes on up there.
I mean, in an area like that, you wouldn't expect to see a great deal of crime, particularly things like violent crime, because obviously it's an area that is very, very sparsely populated. the most emergency services involvement you'd often see would be things like, mountain rescues of walkers, as opposed to actual crime and, the police being called in to investigate serious incidents particularly.
But on April 22nd, 2022, unspeakable horrors take place in the forest. A local woman has disappeared.
It didn't feel right at all. She was a mum who would have been home for her children, so it was one of those that from the off really felt a bit worrying.
The missing woman is identified as 33-year-old Katie Kenyon from Burnley, Lancashire.
Katie Kenyon was a mother of two. She was in her early 30s, and she was somebody that was known for, not just love of her own kids, but of all kids. She loved to be surrounded by children and young people, even to the extent that she tried to set up summer camps for children in her local area. She loved to spend time with her dog, and she was really happy in the outdoors. She was also close to her family. She was, described as a beautiful soul by her family, and somebody that was really outgoing, vivacious and lively. Somebody that liked to be around other people and had so much going on for her.
She has had her ups and downs. She's split from her previous partner, but she's got her life back on track. She's got her children. She's got her beloved dog, Indy. She's got two sisters. She's the middle sister. She's got her mum. She normally texts her mum 2 or 3 times a day, so she's a real family person, and she's extremely loved, likeable. Her family even say that, she's a little bit silly in the sense of, she's got a great sense of humour. So she's someone that she's special. She's really special.
Katie's family are the first to sense something is wrong when they receive texts from her phone that seem unusual.
Well, the chain of events that makes Katie Kenyon's family suspicious is that she disappears, they don't hear from her, or they hear from somebody using her phone, but they don't believe to be her. They say that the messages that are coming through, there are things like misspellings or grammatical or punctuation errors that she wouldn't ordinarily make.
They were not in the way that Katie would phrase anything. The grammar was poor, the phraseology was poor. They became concerned that these text messages perhaps weren't actually from Katie at all.
There was one word in particular that was repeatedly spelled wrong, and that word was while. Every time that word was used, and it was used several times, it was spelt without the H. The other glaring problem was that the messages spoke about the dog, Indy, and the dog's name was spelt wrong. Katie wouldn't have spelt her own dog's name wrong.
Katie's off-boyfriend, 51-year-old Andrew Burfield, also received strange text messages from her that day.
Just give us a ring whenever you can, lads. It doesn't have to be like this, we can sort it out. Whatever help you need, whatever you need from me, I don't know anybody else. I just need to know you're safe and where you're going, that's all.
Katie had been in an on and off relationship with Andrew Burfield. He was a builder, kind of doing odd jobs and so on. They didn't live together, but they were on and off in a relationship. Her relationship with Burfield was very strange. He seemed to really manipulate her. Burfield would use her mental health against her. He really weaponised her mental health. She was suffering from anxiety. She had made that clear. He would always mention it. He'd be mentioning it in text messages. He'd mention it to her all the time. He'd mention it to her family. Really, we know that with coercive control, anxiety is only going to get worse. And so she's with someone, she's already anxious, and he's gaslighting her. And the more and more he mentions it, the more and more she's going to be getting anxious. And the more and more she might start believing that actually is here to help me, but I do have all these problems, and maybe I'm not good enough, and maybe I'm not worthy, and maybe I'm not good enough mum, and maybe I'm not a good enough sister. So he's chipping away and eroding her confidence. It's reported that Burfield had lent Katie some money. Debt collectors were involved, even though this was a personal arrangement. What was happening, though, was that Burfield was getting debt collectors involved, who would understandably chase Katie for this money, but he would tell Katie not to worry, that it's going to be okay, that he will sort things out. So this really unusual split type of behaviour was going on behind the scenes. Financially abusing a victim can also ensure that they're further isolating them.
I'm a bit worried. Just ring me. I have to do this. I'm not worried about the money. Don't worry about the money. Just ring me, please. Okay.
He's saying, well, don't worry about the money, Babs. I'll I'll sort it and I'll pay it. Now, it's an accumulating debt, so it's gone from sort of 2,000 to 4,000 to 6,000, and this, for someone who is highly anxious, is going to be absolutely terrifying them. She's worried she's going to lose her home. She's worried she's going to lose everything. And then behind the scenes, he's phoning up the debt collectors saying, can you put more pressure on her? And then he goes back to her again. Oh, it's okay, don't worry about the money. It's fine, it's all going to be okay. I'm going to help you. He's this knight in shining armour. So there's this absolute duplicitous occurrence of what's going on with this money, and it's definitely there to control her.
It soon becomes evident that Katie had been fearful of Burfield in the months leading up to her disappearance.
Things were so bad that Katie at one point had said to her sister, if I disappear, if something happens to me, it will be him. That gives you an indication of just how bad things were in that relationship, but the extent too of the control Andrew Burfield had over her, that she wasn't able to break free of that.
It seemed to be the case that they'd separated on some level, but Burfield just kept reeling her back in. He just kept telling her, I'm going to get you the help. He had this money that he was holding over her. He had her in the palm of his hand, really, in one way.
Katie's family grow increasingly worried for her well-being and decide to go to Burfield's house to see if he's had contact with her.
Katie's sister and her boyfriend turn up at Burfield's house, and oddly, he's not allowing them entry.
Her car is outside Andrew Burfield's home, and her family see this vehicle there, realise that they can't get hold of her. So that's the point at which the alarm is raised with the police.
Evidence is beginning to suggest that Burfield may know more than he's letting on about Katie's disappearance. Her sister calls the police, who pay Burfield a visit. What will he reveal? 33-year-old Katie Kenyon, a mother of two from Burnley, Lancashire, has disappeared, raising concerns among her family after they received suspicious text messages from her phone. Her sister pays a visit to Andrew Burfield, Katie's on-off boyfriend who has been financially manipulating her, and notices her car is parked outside his house. She calls the police, who arrive promptly to investigate.
And then you see this incredible footage of the body-worn video that the officers are wearing when they confront Andrew Burfield about the whereabouts of Katie Kenyon.
These guys outside are concerned about Katie. Do you know where she is?
Yeah, no, I don't. What's happening? I got a text at 2:30
today.
Yeah, saying I came to your house this morning. I'll show you the text.
From Katie?
Yeah. But when I picked the kids up from school, we came on. The keys behind the door. So we came into the keys behind the door. So she did.
You know, he's immediately sparks up a cigarette, seems quite nervous, but what he doesn't seem is emotional or concerned or worried at that time either about where she might be. He doesn't share the same emotions as the family, even though he's with her. And that's quite a poignant thing to look at somebody's body language at that point.
She told me she was on a walk. She was, she told me, she said she dropped the car off this morning. And the stuff. Before that message came through, so, what are you up to, lads? That's me, what are you up to, guys? And that were at 1:30. She was just out on a walk. You?
Burfield didn't seem worried in the slightest. He was just saying, no, I'm not, this has only just happened. But then, from the messages that he showed the police, it seemed that he'd been concerned about her from 2 o'clock that afternoon. So several hours he'd been texting her saying, come home. Didn't look.
Sorry to interrupt. So, are you concerned, Katie? Yeah. So, have you reported anything?
No, it's only just happened. It's I've had a sister.
You said the message come at 2:30.
Yeah. So the message come through at 2:45.
Yeah.
And you've replied pretty much straight away. I know. I'm just wondering because you said it's only just happened, but it's happened at like 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Yeah, I picked the kids up. I came here at 4. To be honest with you, I thought it was just like I was still like.
So you weren't concerned?
I were, but I were, if you will.
Okay.
Having viewed the body cam footage, it's really clear to me that the police that attended the house knew that something wasn't right. They were questioning Burfield, they were trying to get to the bottom of what happened. They didn't see this as a straightforward missing person case.
that man getting to it.
But he's had these messages from just before 2 today, but he's not reported them. He sent messages back saying that what the hell was going on here, but he's not reported this and that. Concern.
The day progresses without anyone having seen or heard from Katie, and Burfield denies any knowledge of her whereabouts. Police now ramp up their investigation.
They know that there have been these messages from Katie's phone, so they're then able to investigate those, and they can kind of use cell site analysis to ping where that phone has been, basically. And what they can see from that is that as well as being at Andrew Burfield's property, the phone has left that area and has been in the area of Gisborne Forest for around 51 minutes earlier that day. So that's something that enables them a very quick way of locating at least where that device has been, if not necessarily where Katie has been. But they're then able to use that triangulated phone data against camera showings from CCTV that prove that Burfield's transit van left that area with Katie in the vehicle. When it returned around an hour later, she's not in the vehicle, but the phone still is.
What they couldn't see was Andrew Burfield's phone moving at all from his home address, as though it's been left there. However, what they could see, Katie's phone, once that phone has then cell-sighted back to Andrew Burfield's home, it goes off.
Which is ringing all sorts of alarm bells. Where is she? Where did he drop her off? Where has she been left? What has happened to Katie?
The SIO then makes a decision to say, right, this person is no longer essentially a person of interest. He is now a suspect. And decisions were made to go back to him, back to Andrew Burfield's house the following day on the 23rd of April.
What they found when they got to the house, though, was that even though it was a really hot day, the log burner was on. It was really hot, and this was unusual.
It was so hot, it was like a furnace inside the house. An indication there that perhaps things are being burnt on that fire. You know, completely unnecessary to have it, so why has he got that fire burning? A decision was made at that point when they could link that van to Andrew Burfield and say, she was in that van when she left. When your van came back, she was no longer there. So, without body, without any evidence at that stage in his inquiry, the SIO makes a decision that he should be arrested for kidnap.
Where is the last location that you know that she was?
At my house.
Right, so you know she was at your house?
Yeah.
Okay, and when was that?
What was it? 9:20 yesterday morning.
Okay. So since then you don't know her whereabouts?
I don't know where she's gone from there now.
As questioning continues, Burfield begins to reveal more information.
He told the police at one point that he'd lent Katie £6,000 to go and check into a rehab centre or a clinic.
I think she's at a rehab centre.
A rehab centre?
Or some sort of clinic.
Right, okay. And where would that be?
I haven't got a clue.
Right, okay. And why do you think that she's at that location?
That's not that location, one of them locations, I think.
He has no idea where the rehab clinic or centre is, what its name is, how she would have got there, given that her vehicle is still outside. So he's still then saying, oh, she's gone there, I don't know anything.
I'm going to appeal to you now to let me know if you do know anything at all.
I'll tell you, I'll go and get her myself.
Yeah? Okay, because I'm sure you're aware that her family are really, really concerned.
Yeah.
The last place she's known to be is parked up on your road.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Which is obviously why you're in custody. So it's reasonable for us to think that you may know where she is.
Yeah, okay.
Alright. So please, if you do know.
I don't, honestly.
Burfield insists he has nothing to do with Katie's disappearance. His phone is seized and sent for digital analysis. DCI Alan Davies and his team turn their focus to searching the area, including Gisborne Forest.
With such a unique case in this rural area, it becomes a huge inquiry for that senior investigating officer. He's bringing in resources, quite rightly, from all sorts of places. Mountain rescue, he's got dogs, he's got drones and planes, everybody looking, because essentially Gisborne Forest, where that was the last place where they believe she may have been taken to, is a 25-mile radius. It's a huge area, and of course he needs to narrow down. He's not getting any help from Andrew Burfield about where she might be. He has an idea of the direction of the van was going in, but what happens when there's no CCTV, when there's no cell site information, and now he's just faced with the forest. So the next step he decides to do is, well, let's ramp up this media appeal.
The last sighting of Katie Kenyon was around 9:30 on Friday morning, when a woman matching her description was seen getting into a silver transit van with a man in Burnley.
That van had quite a distinctive panel on the side of it, and it was a white van with a patched up area on the side.
Someone came forward and said, "Oh, we saw this van at this time parked up here." So that means that they can narrow down the search now, and they have this part of the forest where they can now look.
The media appeal results in a significant development in the investigation.
Andrew Burfield was a jobbing builder, but he turned up for a job in slightly unusual circumstances earlier than the occupiers of the home he was working on would have expected. And he engaged them in a slightly odd conversation, asking them when their bins were going to be emptied. That obviously raises some suspicions, and at that point, that bin is then searched, and under the homeowner's reviews, there is some stashed waste, if you like, and in that there are bags within bags, some of which have heavy blood staining, and Katie's flip-flops are in there as well.
Those items were fast-tracked through to check the DNA to find out whether that blood was in fact Katie's blood, as they suspected, and sadly, that came back positive.
Even when the blood is found in the bottom of that bin with her flip-flops and trainers, obviously that can heighten your fear that something might have happened. You cannot lose hope until you have proof that she is no longer alive. And the officers will hold that thought process throughout to make sure that there is nothing that stops them from that continued, overnight, constant working at pace to try and find her alive. In a forest area of that size, there is every possibility that, yes, she may be very badly injured, but she may be alive, and there may be that possibility to save her.
Faced with mounting evidence against him, Burfield decides to speak to the police.
He realises now he's in a really difficult predicament, and that even if they haven't got a body at this stage, that there is now evidence that she has come to some kind of injury.
He changed his story quite drastically.
Burfield was about to reveal a story that would shock even the most hardened investigators. On 22nd April 2022, Katie Kenyon, a 33-year-old mother of two, disappeared without a trace in a rural part of Lancashire. Police investigated her on-off boyfriend, 51-year-old Andrew Burfield, after he was seen on CCTV driving Katie in his van, and blood-stained bags were located at his workplace. With the evidence surmounting against him, Burfield decides it is time to tell police his version of the story.
Andrew Burfield has asked to be interviewed. Now, this is quite unusual, because when somebody does that, you think, well, they've got something to say, and potentially you hope at that stage, maybe even a confession to say this is what's happened.
I believe that you want to speak to us today, so I'm just going to hand it over to you to tell us what you want to say.
We parked the van up and we went to our site, which we always go to. I say always, but we've twice into our...
Right.
That's where she's doing.
That's where she still is.
Andrew Burfield then comes up with this story to say, we were in this part of the forest, we went there for a picnic, but during that time there, Katie dared me to throw an axe that I had and knock a Coke can out of her hand. And of course he's, for everybody listening to that at that particular point would be, well, that's just ridiculous. Why would somebody even ask you to do that? And of course then when they go in to speak to him further, he says, well, I decided not to do that, so I threw it at a tree, but I accidentally threw it and it hit her. And that was kind of his story. It's an accidental death.
So we don't know what went wrong. You were aiming at the tree and...
No, I can't even say a slip, fell, I just don't even know what went wrong. It's stupid, isn't it? But I'll never do that. It's so stupid.
How close was she from?
He then said that he was in the middle of the forest, there was no mobile phone reception to call for help, he was panicking, he didn't think that he was strong enough to lift Katie and take her to get medical assistance or take her anywhere.
There's no help there, is the thing?
No.
No people. There was signal on the phone, they couldn't carry her. They can't get it. So a boyfriend can't carry your own girlfriend.
Andrew Burfield continues to say that having thrown the axe and it's accidentally hit Katie, that he kind of, doesn't say he panicked, but what he does say is he went back to his van and he even considered killing himself at that point. But then he decides in his mind, as he told the officers, that he needs to get his finances straight first. So he then goes back to Katie's body, which he now believes to be dead, and buries her in a shallow grave.
I just don't know what I'm doing, honestly. I'm covered in blood. I brought to her straight away.
The officers then are thinking, right, okay, then so where is it? Because what was clear is that they couldn't find something that fitted that description at all. This shallow grave, which would be a panic dig and then stuff thrown on top of it. But they couldn't see anything like that in the area where they had been focusing of where that van was last seen.
They had helicopters up, they had dogs, they had officers searching the forest for this shallow grave, but they couldn't find it.
Andrew Burfield even tells the investigating officers this is exactly where it happened and where she is. Well, the officers are there at the scene and they can't find it. So something doesn't add up here. They're very curious as to where is she, because we would normally see something like this and it would be obvious to our search teams, to the dogs, all sorts of things. So obviously it's confusing for them. They don't know where she is and they still haven't found her.
They had all their top search people looking for this grave. I mean, it's horrific to think about. There's a young woman buried in the forest. They're going to use every resource that they've got for that, but it was so well hidden that they just couldn't find it.
They realise that effectively without his help, they're not going to be able to locate the exact site where she is because there is no evidence anywhere of the ground having been disturbed.
It's a few days later when they produce him from prison.
You do not have to say anything.
April 29th, 2022. Police have now been searching for 7 days for Katie Kenyon's body. As a last resort, police take Burfield out of custody and ask him to show them where he buried her.
Now take us to where you buried the body. Help us, because we can't find it.
I've never heard of the police taking somebody out to a gravesite like that before, but Burfield had done such a good job of hiding it that they were left with no other option. They needed to find Katie. They needed to get her a proper burial and the dignity that she deserved. And they also needed to get the evidence that they needed to convict her killer.
When you produce someone from prison, obviously there's an element of security that has to be in place. What you don't want is that prisoner running away for a start. So you have a sufficient number of officers there to produce him from prison in a secure van and take him to the area where you want to take him. But of course those officers still talk about the fear that, he may become violent or, try and escape. But when you plan something like that, as the SIO did in this case, he's planned it so that that is not going to be a possibility. We have everything in place to make sure he's not going anywhere. The main focus that SIO had was the reason you're here is to tell us where that body is and you're not going anywhere.
Accompanied by police, Andrew Burfield gives exact directions to the burial site.
Follow this right to the top now to T-junction. About the mile is saying.
As Andrew Burfield is being driven to the forest to identify where he has buried Katie, you can see from the footage above what a beautiful countryside, what an idyllic place this is, and how incredibly unusual that something like this would happen in that area. But also, in matching against this beautiful countryside is this dark and morbid kind of thing that has happened. And it's, for people that live there and people that, consider that a lot of people have gone to retire to those sort of places, this would be a very shocking thing for their community. And then to come out, as he walks out of the van, to identify where a body is, what he has done to this person, where he has buried that body, is a deeply shocking thing.
Sorry, what you said? This is where the big meet. Okay.
And then he suddenly sits down on the floor, crosses his legs, and it's that indication that this is where she is. Well, what was clear to the officers and the search teams there, some of these, the people have done this before, are experts in this kind of thing, was that they couldn't see any makeshift shallow graves anywhere near he was sitting.
He was a builder, so he knew about digging holes, but it had been done with real precision.
Archaeologists subsequently said that the ground had effectively been relayed perfectly with clay, with soil, and then with topsoil.
Absolutely flat. and looked untouched, and even the root of one of the trees that was growing there, he'd managed to weave that in without damaging it.
And of course that raised huge suspicions as to, well, that doesn't look like somebody who's panicked. Somebody who's panicked because they've accidentally killed somebody and they've just put in a shallow grave and driven back really quickly in a matter of half an hour or 50 minutes. So even more suspicions that actually there must be some pre-planning in this.
Police begin to suspect that Katie's murder was premeditated.
In circumstances of this type of inquiry, you start to try and build a timeline that you can see almost down to the minute what is happening. And the officers, in this case, using the CCTV, using telephone calls, text messages, sightings, ANPR, all that kind of thing comes into your timeline to try and work out what's happened. And they also want to put that timeline against what Andrew Burfield is saying. Could he have done what he's done in the time that we can narrow him down to? And essentially where that starts is, at the moment he leaves his house in that van, to the moment that van arrives back, which is 51 minutes. Now they start to work out, well, hang on a minute, let's look at what he says has happened. I get there, I park up, it's a certain amount of distance to walk to where they had a picnic. We then get the picnic out, we then do this, the acts where this accident happens. We then go back to my van, I then do this, I think about what I'm going to do. I then go and dig a grave for an adult body, and then I dig it enough that I can put the body in and throw stuff back over the top. It didn't fit at all. There's no way. And even the officers in the inquiry team there did almost a rerun to try and go through things that he says has happened, and worked out obviously straight away that it's impossible what he's done.
You have not dug that hole in the 10 minutes that you have said to us. It might have been longer. Right, okay.
I don't know how long we were there, do I? All I'm saying is I don't all that bit.
We know how long you're there, and you're not long enough.
But they need to work out now this is premeditated. What has he done in the days preceding when he said he accidentally killed Katie?
This is a predator.
Lancashire police are investigating the kidnapping and suspected murder of 33-year-old mother Katie Kenyon. Her on-off boyfriend, 51-year-old Andrew Burfield, was arrested after blood-stained bags were found at his workplace. Burfield claims he accidentally killed Katie while playing a game involving an axe. 7 days later, after her disappearance, police have released him from custody to show them where he buried her, now suspecting the murder was premeditated.
The thing is, Andrew, you've told us a lot over the last few days, haven't you? And you've told us a lot, certainly today, a lot of information. And a lot of it just does not add up. Okay. And ultimately, we don't believe you of what you've said. Okay. But do not believe that this has been an accident. This is about your control and your over Katie, and you're losing the control.
Police examine Burfield's movements in the days leading up to the murder.
One of the first things they see is CCTV the day before, the 21st of April, where he is seen clearly on the CCTV borrowing a spade from his dad and putting it in that grey panel van with that distinctive black panel on the side. It helps to form that notion that perhaps he's gone and actually dug something beforehand. That does come to proof. What they do then is they then find CCTV of him the day before going to the forest to the exact same location. And on that particular occasion, this is where they believe he has dug in preparation for killing Katie.
The police told Burfield that they knew that he'd been in the forest the day before. He had to think on his feet, really, and the story that he came up with was that he just had new brakes put on his van and he needed to bed them in. So he'd been up to the forest, testing his brakes, took his dog for a walk the night before.
But the evidence at the crime scene told a different story.
As the crime scene itself is being examined by the forensic teams, they notice two sets of footprints now in this grave that has been identified. One set of footprints has zigzags on, the other one is like a block print. So two sets of footprints don't match what Katie would have been wearing, either flip-flops or her trainers. So, it indicates either two people there, which has to be a hypothesis for the investigating officer initially, or that someone has been there on two different occasions who owns two different pairs of shoes. What you could see on the CCTV footage the day before Katie was killed, when Andrew Burfield was collecting a spade from his father's address, was that he was wearing a certain type of trainer that has the zigzags on it. What they also found later on was that the block print of the print that was next to that grave matched his work boots that he also owned as a builder. So the indication then helped them again have that theory that he's been there before over 2 different occasions.
The body is taken in for an autopsy, where the extent of Katie's injuries are revealed.
When they took Katie's body off for a post-mortem, it was immediately apparent that he was lying. This was no accident. Katie had 12 different injuries to her head and some defensive injuries as well, where there'd been a struggle.
To the point where she's unrecognisable and the family don't even get to see her body because she's been too mutilated.
There was no way that was a game gone wrong.
Everything that he says has happened has been proved to not be true, proved to be impossible, proved to be a timeline of which his timeline is completely and utterly opposite to the CCTV, to the phones, to the ANPR, to the witness statements, to what he's done at the scene in this beautiful forest. Everything doesn't match up. The evidence tells you one story. Andrew Burfield is telling you a completely different story.
We're looking at a predatorial stalker here, a serial perpetrator, someone with no remorse whatsoever, someone with no empathy, someone who doesn't show any compassion to her children, to her mum, to her sisters, and he weaves this web of deceit remorselessly.
The more the police dig into Andrew Burfield's background, they identify previous girlfriends. And the situation that he had with them, the relationships he had with them were very similar. Very controlling, a misogynist, very nasty person.
But what we also then find out is that he's on Tinder, he's on dating sites, he's been to places before where he knows that there is a woman who's living alone in a house and they need a builder. And he asks impertinent questions that ring alarm bells. So, are you living alone? Do you have a partner? Do you have a husband? And he needs this information in order to pick victims, because that's what he's doing. He's picking victims all the time to see how he can manipulate them.
There's evidence of him being a fantasist, a Walter Mitty type of character. He had potentially another relationship in Scotland with trips back and forth to Scotland. He claimed that he had a large property empire.
She even says that you had said that you were going to buy a house and that you've got a portfolio of a number of houses.
That's relevant.
The way it's relevant is because it's about you, Andrew, and the fact that you have told lies, you tell lies to women, and you manipulated these relationships to control, and you fantasise about a life that you would want to have.
That's not a crime, is it?
That's not a crime.
Is it?
Because we're building to the fact that this hasn't just happened on Friday, as you have tried to account for this morning. What we're saying is that hasn't happened, okay?
Further evidence of his premeditation was discovered during the analysis of his phone.
And what they see there is a series, 2 or 3 weeks before, where he is typing out responses of text messages premeditated to send to the children and family on his notes in his phone. And that he would then transfer them from notes into text messages on the day that he killed her or the days after. This was his plan. So they could see that all those things were written weeks before in preparation to give a full story as to where Katie might be.
Burfield left voicemails for Katie after he savagely murdered her in an attempt to deflect police attention from him.
You want to speak on it to the doctor, eh? No? Can you hear me? I don't know what's happening. I don't know.
All these frantic things that he's doing around these messages and how he's supposed to be worried about her. 2 minutes later, they see on his phone he's texting other women saying what a great day he's having, had a good day at work, and allegedly sitting there watching the football as well on TV. Of course, this builds a picture that this man has premeditated, he's done what he thinks. He now thinks he's done enough to throw everyone off the scent, and now he can relax. But obviously little does he know that actually what he's doing is he's creating more and more evidence for the police to narrow down on him as being the person that killed Katie.
Katie herself even had her concerns about you. She even told her own sister. And basically what she said to her sister was, if I go missing, it will be him, meaning you, who's done it.
On the basis of all of the evidence that they had, the police felt confident enough to charge him with murder.
The murder trial begins at Preston Crown Court in Lancashire on November 14th, 2022.
Interestingly, he wanted a trial, and that automatically makes you think the poor parents, the poor sisters, the poor children, they're going to have to listen to what happened to their loved one in graphic detail.
Burfield was sitting in the dock and his demeanour never changed throughout the whole thing. He had very much a poker face on. He wasn't going to give anything away by his body language, but as the prosecution case came out, point by point, it was almost jaw-dropping. The levels of manipulation that he was using, the control that he was holding over Katie, the gaslighting, it was... You just felt enormous sympathy for her. She must not have known where her head was at. And then, when it came out that he'd planned all of this wasn't an argument that got out of hand. He'd gone to great lengths to ensure that this happened. With the writing of the text messages, the digging of the grave, it was chilling. On the third day of the trial, we went to court and there was a huge delay. And when Burfield was brought into court, they asked for the charge to be put to him again. And at that point, Burfield pleaded guilty to murder.
Andrew Burfield changed his plea to guilty 3 days into his trial for killing Katie Kenyon, who was from Peckham. Burfield had claimed he killed Katie by accident. Yesterday, he changed his plea to guilty. The judge told the 51-year-old that he should prepare himself, that he might die in jail.
You know, it's often said in murder trials that murder requires malice aforethought, some form of premeditation, but that premeditation can be formed in an instant before doing an act that is intended to kill or seriously injure somebody. Well, this is premeditation running back weeks and weeks at an absolute minimum and running over a pattern of behaviour where he has been coercive, controlling towards Katie and to others. So this is somebody that was effectively a ticking time bomb. I suppose, if it hadn't been Katie Kenyon, it would have been somebody else. This was clearly a very, very dangerous, very sadistic, very cruel, and entirely lacking in empathy individual, because you look at the way that he tried to even deceive her family, not even giving her family the kind of closure that they would have wanted, either quickly or even trying to maintain this fallacy that she was alive. It's disgusting.
His guilty plea was to save himself a little bit of time in prison. He doesn't care about anyone else.
The court was packed on the day of sentence. Everybody wanted to see justice served to this evil, evil man. Burfield came into the dock and he looked a little bit crestfallen, I suppose, like he had finally been caught. He wasn't getting away with this terrible thing that he planned.
Andrew Burfield is then sentenced to 32 years in prison, and that's a minimum term as well, because of the dangerousness that he poses to the public.
Burfield's life sentence is a relief for Katie's family, but it will not bring her back.
Katie Kenyon was a young woman who still had her whole life ahead of her. She should have been able to watch her children grow up. She should have been able to spend time in the community that she loved, doing the simple pleasures that she seemed to adore, being out with children, being out in the outdoors and nature.
Burfield robbed Katie of the chance to live a healthy, long life, to be around the children that she loves so dearly and all of her family, and the wider implications of this for her family and the community cannot be understated. I didn't know Katie, but I got a feeling from her family and her friends and the photographs and everything that we'd seen that she seemed lovely. Burfield was chilling. To think of what she went through, it's absolutely heartbreaking.
Andrew Burfield is a coercive and controlling, manipulative person and is a very dangerous, very evil man. And the indignity that he showed to her in the relationship, carried on with indignity in the way that he treated her after death as well, leaving her in his hope that she would never be found in a forest.
The Forest of Bowland is such a picturesque place. It's a real beauty spot. It's the last place that you would expect something so dark and chilling to take place.